So welcome back to part 2 of What is Sociology? So let's look at what you're going to learn in this particular video. First of all, you're going to learn to use your sociological imagination to link your own personal experiences to larger social issues for a deeper understanding of society and to help you develop critical thinking skills. Second of all, you're going to look at preparing for your career. You're going to look at how sociology can help you to build strong skills for a wide variety of careers and the different types of jobs that are available to sociologists. Let's begin by looking at what is a sociological perspective. And here is what past student Danielle has to say.
People say, I don't know why I do what I do, I just do it sometimes. Well, there's two thoughts that would likely cross people's minds when they hear things like that. Most people would probably think, yeah, okay, that's fair to say, and may even admit to saying it themselves sometimes. But for those who have studied sociology extensively, they would likely think, give me an hour of your time, and I'll give reason to every feeling, thought, or idea you've ever had about the world, and ultimately make you understand why you are the way that you are. But don't worry, I don't think your professor would ever do that to you.
So what Danielle is highlighting is the fact that sociology always asks the why. And it's an important discipline for developing good analytical skills. It also has the ability to see the relationship between individual behavior and what is going on in the wider community. The ability to identify this connection is one of the pillars of community policing, for example. So when looking at criminal behavior, you're not identifying a person as the quote-unquote bad apple, but you're looking at the tree that the apple was formed on as the potential problem. One of the key elements of sociology that we're going to look at is the concept of agency versus structure. Agency refers to a micro approach that we talked about in our previous video, and structure is a macro approach. So agency really is the ability of individuals to make free, independent decisions. So let's look at your decision to come to college. Let's say that you believe that this decision to come to college was a free, independent decision that you made. It was your own individual choice, and it was based on free will. That would mean that your social behavior of choosing to come to college was determined by an individual choice that you made based on free will. Now let's look at that decision to come to college using the structural approach. So a structural approach is really looking at the organized patterns of social relationships in a society. It looks at the social forces that influence our choices, that are often beyond our control. So in essence, it looks at social behavior being determined by social structures and their influence that they have on decision making. So let's look at a couple of possible scenarios. That decision to come to college may have been influenced by factors other than your own individual choice and free will. It may be influenced by the expectation in society that you have a career, that you are engaged in gainful employment, and that you pay taxes. It may also be that, in your scenario, your parents are the external social force that's influencing your choice to come to college. And while you also agree that you want to do this, you may be influenced by their persuasion. For a really good look at how agency and structure interplay in decision making in our lives, I've put on Blackboard for you this week's video by Sam Richards, and the name of the video is called The Wisdom of Sociology. Dr. Sam Richards is an award-winning teacher and sociologist who works at Penn State University in the States. His work focuses primarily on race and ethnicity, and his TED Talk called A Radical Experiment in Empathy, is the third most widely viewed TED Talk in the entire world. Dynamic lecture and great video. Hope you'll watch it. And what Sam is talking about in the video is this push and pull between our personal choice in life, our free will, and social forces, those external factors that actually influence and affect our agency and personal choices. The second element of sociology that we want to look at when we're looking at defining what a sociological perspective is are the views developed by Peter Berger. And he says that we have the ability to view the world from two very distinct perspectives. Right? And the first one is what Berger refers as the general and the particular. By this, Berger meant that sociologists look for general patterns in the behavior of particular people. Although every individual is unique, a society shapes the lives of people in various categories, such as specific behavior for children and adults, for women and men, for the rich and the poor. We begin to see the world sociologically when we realize how the general categories into which we fall can actually shape our particular life experiences. So, for example, we may think that marriage results simply from the personal feelings of love. Yet the sociological perspective shows us that factors such as age, or culture, or social class can guide our selection of a partner. It might be more accurate to think of love as a feeling we have for others who match up with what society teaches us we want in a mate. The second perspective that Berger talks about is something called the strange in the familiar. And by this, Berger meant that all of us tend to take the rules of our society for granted. But as sociologists, we should try to see how what seems normal is actually situational. It means that it is dependent upon the social context in which it is found. So let me give you an example. Let's look at what you might typically have for breakfast. Would you recognize the meal in this photo as what you might typically eat for breakfast? Or did it resemble this? Or did it resemble this meal? The next concept that we're going to look at is something called the sociological imagination. And this is a foundational concept in sociology. It was developed by a sociologist by the name of C. Wright Mills. He published a book called The Sociological Imagination. And as a concept, it means that we should look at personal troubles or individual challenges that somebody may have, and rather than blame them, we look to see how this is a larger public issue resulting from larger social forces in a society. So essentially, the sociological imagination is the ability to see the relationship between personal experience and how that's affected by larger social forces in a wider society. So let's apply the concepts that we've learned thus far in a storyboard. Meet Bob, Sarah, and Steve. Let's pretend that they're attending a Niagara College class. Let's say it's pre-COVID-19. Each student is provided an iPad to complete a quiz in class. Steve's social environment puts him in a situation where he has never had to use an iPad before. So he's saying, how do I use this thing? Bob is assuming that Steve lives or lived in a similar world to him. He says, hey, Sarah, can you believe that kid can't use an iPad? That's crazy. But Sarah points out that not everyone knows how to use an iPad, recognizing that we should try to see that how what seems to be normal is actually situational. Sarah is using her sociological imagination to understand that Steve's lack of knowledge about how to use an iPad is personal experience that's reflective of a larger social issue in his rural community, that being lack of internet connectivity and the low value culturally that's placed on technology. So Sarah says Steve's from a rural village in northern Canada, and he's never used an iPad. Bob says, I see. I realize not everyone lives the same lives we do. Bob then begins to open up and use his own sociological imagination. He is making the familiar strange in order to understand Steve's point of view. Steve understands the relationship between the two within society, where Bob and Steve have come from two very different social worlds. Using his sociological imagination, Bob is able to now understand that Steve's personal experience with iPads is related to a public issue within his community, and that he has limited internet, but also where things like fishing are more highly valued than using technology. Yeah, I bet $1 million that you don't know how to ice fish. So why study sociology? For now, this is a course within your program. But if you were to look at a degree in sociology, some of the things that it can teach you is how to make informed decisions using evidence, something that we looked at in the first video. You can also help to look at what shapes social and public policies and practices. Sociology aids in understanding diversity. Sociology helps you to develop critical thinking and analytical skills, and it can expand career opportunities. Some of the employment sectors that people with degrees in sociology end up working in are obviously law enforcement, and sometimes as a degree before law school. People with degrees in sociology also work in the healthcare field, and in social and rural development, in epidemiology, in journalism. Many sociology graduates also end up working for Statistics Canada. Some, like myself, end up being professors. Some work in human resource management, and others work in business, in advertising and marketing. So let's summarize some of the key points that we've learned in our first and second video in our Unit 1 on what is sociology. In our first video, we looked at the fact that sociology is a scientific study of human society and social behavior, and that sociology relates to your everyday life. Also in the first video, we looked at the difference between the concept of macro-sociology that looks at large groups and whole societies, and micro-sociology that looks at individuals and small groups. In this video, we looked at the concept of the sociological imagination developed by C. Wright Mills that links personal experiences to social and public issues. We also looked at Peter Berger's concept of what a sociological perspective is. One of his concepts is that we should try to see common features in unique circumstances, and the second is that we should try to see how what is normal is actually situational. So within Unit 1, you should go to Blackboard and watch the video this week, The Wisdom of Sociology by Dr. Sam Richards. You should complete the bonus mark activity that looks at applying your sociological imagination to living during the coronavirus pandemic, and make sure that you completed Chapter 1 of your textbook.